our country is on the brink of a housing crisis of unprecedented magnitude and with no safety net beneath us. COVID-19 struck at a time when we were already at a housing crisis. 20.5 million families struggled to scrape the rent together, and only 1 in 4, so 25% of eligible renters actually received federal financial assistance, and they were eligible. That means that many people did not qualify for or did not receive housing subsidies even though they were qualified. So between the scarcity of federal housing assistance and the loss of 4 million affordable housing units over the last decade, renters were increasingly vulnerable to eviction coming into the pandemic. To put this in perspective, 7 evictions were filed every minute in 2016. That was when the average national unemployment rate was 4.7%. Today, as you know, unemployment is nearly 4 times that level and expected to keep fluctuating upwards. So why can we expect eviction to increase? Underscoring the immense toll of the pandemic, 50 million renters today live in households that suffered COVID-19 related job loss or income loss. And 40% of that occurred in especially low-income households. A new analysis of the US Census House Pulse Survey by Stout, Reeses, and Ross that came out today estimates that approximately 16.9 million households, many of which contain numerous adults and children, are unable to pay the rent and at risk of eviction. Another study by the Aspen Institute found that 20 to 24 million renters will be facing eviction by the end of September. So again, to put this in perspective, 10 million people were displaced from their homes over a course of years following the foreclosure crisis of 2008. We are on track to surpass that number in just 4 months. Renters of color, especially Black and Latinx renters, are at the highest risk. In response to the increasing risk of eviction, state and local governments issued moratoriums, and the federal government passed the CARES Act, which created a moratorium on federally assisted housing and also had temporary unemployment insurance. These prevented widespread eviction between March and July, but these are also expiring at the end of July, along with the majority of state-issued moratoriums. And this is before states have developed and implemented strategies to really support property owners and renters to weather this storm. So today, less than half of the states have a state-level eviction moratorium, and 29 states received less than 1 out of 5 stars on the housing policy scorecard that I created with the Eviction Lab at Princeton University. This means that evictions that were on hold will be executed and new evictions will be filed. Michigan's moratorium, for example, expired this week, and they expect 80,000 eviction filings now. The majority of courts have moved to remote hearings, which also raises questions about a tenant's ability to exercise their right to be heard. Between the technology divide, the lack of minutes on their phone, the ability to pay for their phone or access a computer when they can't pay the rent, as well as language barriers and others, create significant due process concerns. So what does this mean for renters and for society? Well, eviction has negative consequences that result in high community and healthcare expenditures. Just the notice of eviction can increase rates of stress, anxiety, and depression. Renters with eviction filings on their record are often blocked out of the renter market by landlords, even if they ultimately won their case. Eviction results in failing credit scores. It forces families into rental housing with substandard conditions that pose a threat to their health and safety. And it almost always leads to a downward move to rundown housing, to disadvantaged higher crime neighborhoods, homelessness, academic decline. No good outcome from eviction. And these outcomes cost communities and taxpayers far more than the price of addressing the affordable housing crisis itself. In places like California, the risk of eviction has resulted in a rise in the creation of unions. Renters have started to protest, demanding cancel the rent or rent relief. And the formation of these tenant unions in buildings and communities was designed to really organize and increase tenant bargaining power. They have had early successes, including rent control ordinances. Ultimately, the pandemic magnified and heightened the socioeconomic divide and the health and racial disparities and shredded the already threadbare safety net in America. State leaders, federal leaders have an unparalleled opportunity to address these outcomes and their root causes, to ensure that the new post-pandemic reality is one in which health justice, racial justice, and housing justice are realized.